Like, I know we have a dinner schedule. We were supposed to go check out the latest Indian restaurant. Okay, fine. I went. I said, got to get back early because I have this interview that I really want to be ready for. We ended up at the gay club until the wee hours of the night. And so didn't get much sleep. So I'm a hot mess this morning. And my husband woke up with an anonymous text this morning saying, "Hey, daddy."
All right.
Yeah.
Happy Pride!
Happy Pride.
Well, I had a fun gay night last night too.
Oh, yay.
Go
Aw,
team.
sad. I had a super hetero night last night. Welcome back, everybody, to another interview with the Apostate Sisters. I'm Patty, and I'm here with my sister, Nancy. And today we have something very special. We're bringing on Kara Reynolds, the author of a brand new book called Priestess. Now, Kara grew up in a church of high control that we'll find out a little bit more about. And throughout the writing of her book, she kind of realized there's a whole lot of deconstruction narratives going on and sisterhood narratives. So I first came across Kara on Instagram. She was kind enough to find me, and she said, "I'm being really bold here, but what do you think about an interview? I've got this book. It seems to align." And I was like, heck yeah, I don't know anything about what I'm doing yet, but let's do it. And so Kara and I maintained contact over the months, and then I got Nancy introduced to Kara, and it turns out Nancy has also written a book. And so those two had quite the connection. To share with you a little bit more about Kara, Kara Reynolds is a watercolor artist who lives in Florida with her husband and their cats.
I just tried to say hello from sunny Florida. And I said, hello from slutty Florida.
She wrote Priestess as a writing exercise and received such generous and excited feedback from the 15 people who read it that she decided to self-publish. This book unpacks evangelical religious trauma via the lens of romantic fantasy, using a fantastical world and a quasi-dark ages setting. Priestess looks at how religious trauma can have long-lasting effects and consequences and interfere with our individual spirituality. Right. So we know that Nancy's read the book and was super into it. And I haven't had a chance to read it yet. But you both have said it's probably good that one of us hasn't read it. But even the little bit that I know about your book, Kara, from seeing you on Instagram and your amazing social media mavenness on Instagram, and what I know about your book, it came through right away. The fact that this is a book about women who are fucking supporting each other instead of backbiting, instead of tearing each other down. They're showing up, on podcasts together and lifting up the creative works of each of them, metaphorically speaking. And I love that. I think that's so important because especially in our upbringings in church culture, I think there's a little bit of things that we get taught very subtly that teach us to backbite and to keep each other in line, right? And to like muscle our way through to get the top man or whatever the fuck, And so it's so beautiful to see creative works looking to change that narrative.
I feel like all high control situations, like one of the first things that they want to do away with is women talking to each other.
Oof.
Right.
Because, it's not why, like, yes, there's such a thing as gossip and unkindness. Like, we know that. We've all been victims of that. But they will literally, these situations or high control, religions, whatever, the last thing they want is people to talk to each other in general. But when you get women together and they talk, they create networks. It's like that documentary, that HBO documentary about the Janes. And then it was about getting women reproductive health care when it wasn't legal. And if you watch that documentary, like so many of the women that worked that network are mothers. Like they weren't like, oh, we, pro-choice, like I'm an activist. No, I'm a mom and I know it's really hard. And if you're not ready to do this, and it was just this network of women, and they were all protecting each other. And like, that's a high control religion. The last thing they want, especially patriarchal, and they all seem to be patriarchal. That's the last thing they don't want us to talk to each other.
How did you learn to engage in such a like authentic and visually pleasing way on Instagram?
So I've been a lifelong reader. I always say books were my friends when I didn't have any. Super lonely kid, and it was such an escape from American evangelical, every day. I was trying to explain it to my husband the other day. I was like, you don't understand. It wasn't God on Sunday. It was God all day, every day. Every song on the radio, would God approve or not? And it's something that like a super normal human like him can't understand. So books were always my escape. I self-published a book now almost 11 years ago. I really thought I was going to be the next great American novelist from an early age. And chasing that didn't make me happy. And so I kind of set that down, and I've been an artist for the last 10 years, and it's been fulfilling and wonderful, and it's taken me to different parts of the globe. But I had a friend last year, and we were talking about, outlets for personal like pain and just things that are burdens that are hard to carry. And I said, I painted some of the best work in my life when I was going through some things that were hard for me. I've done the shadow work. I've gone to therapy. I've, done all of that stuff, but it's still there. Like, the story doesn't go away just because it's been therapized. And so the story of like my own religious trauma, it comes through when I tell a story. There's 3 women that Priestess is for. It's for women over 30 that want to see themselves in fantasy. There's plenty of 19-year-old protagonists in fantasy.
Yep.
Yes.
Women that have dealt with infertility, because Edie does have a very, very intense infertility journey. And then people that have processed religious trauma. More than one stranger that was on my beta reading team of just people that were willing to take a chance and give me their time has religious trauma in their background. How crazy is that? A lot of it is the, pervasive Protestant Americanism, battle hymn of the Republic, Christianity. Then you've got like the televangelist speaking in tongues type. It's a lot of that. But, I had someone who was an ex-Mormon. I had people that, their poor kids don't really get to have grandparent experiences because their parents don't accept them for not being in the world and not being of it and all that stuff. And I'm like, all right, I guess we're going to do this. I've had so many women reach out to me and be like, I left Christianity. I left a high control religion. I left. And it's like, that's crazy. That's crazy. It's so pervasive. It's a wound that you can't see, and it's everywhere. And I think I can't speak to men's experiences, but there are women everywhere carrying this, as well as all of the other weight of being femme identifying, being a woman.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I know, speaking to that point about the trauma we've all taken on from our time in churches of high control, I just have a hard time seeing that it's as limited as we maybe think it is, right? Because any kind of standard Christian church comes along with that narrative of if you're good, you go to heaven. If you're bad, you go to hell. And so like right there, setting up a reward and punishment and just like a punitive situation for us to identify ourselves in is so harmful in and of itself. And that's the baseline before you add on the layers of like personal life control in those churches. So, I mean, it's in some ways it's validating, but unfortunate to hear that you have encountered so many people feeling that way.
Yeah.
And let us hope that works like yours will be a place where people come not necessarily looking for that deconstructive theme, but finding it.
I mean, Edie, my female main character, is, I was a placeholder. I think you can have a character that two characters do the exact same things for different motivations, because I always knew what the plot was going to be and what Edie was going to end up doing. But I was, talking about like her motivations. And I think, like I put myself in as a placeholder initially. So there's a lot of me in Edie. But I also think what I ended up doing is I have a theory about women who have survived high control religion.
Yeah.
And I think there's two types of women. Neither is right, neither is wrong. And it's very reductive to say that. But I tried to put Edie right in the middle because I wanted her to feel like your best friend that also went through what you've gone through as you read.
She's
And the
very
two types of
relatable. Yeah.
yeah, that's like the highest compliment. I just, there's so many great books out there with, and maybe it's from internalized misogyny. There's so many great books out there with not terribly likable heroines, or they're not likable and right away. And I wanted Edie to be like your friend, like she's the girl in the bathroom at the gay bar, and you're like, oh, go ahead, you go ahead. And the two types of women that I've noticed are the rageaholic, that was me. It is me. And then there's this like really like tragically beautiful stoicism that I've seen in other women that have come out of high control religion. And it's this sort of like, you don't get to know me. I'm not gonna be like Kara over here and just spill my guts. But they're both lonely places to be because when you're stoic, you choose isolation. When you're the rageaholic, you push people away with your rage, and then you both end up alone. And so I think the sisterhood aspect of the story is like these women that Edie meets when she goes to the city state. These women that she meets, these three women, it's two women that are close to her age. One of them has a teenage daughter. They rescue her. They show her what love is. She's grown up in this, awful theocracy. And then she meets other women as the story progresses. And these women provide space for her. They provide healing. Because when we meet Edie, if she didn't have her coworkers that are really like her family, they call each other kindred, she would be very bitter. Because both the rageaholic and the stoic, ice queen, end up, if you don't unpack all that pain, you end up really, really alone, and it's so hard. So I just wanted her to sort of, she refers to herself as a hot-blooded woman. She is the rageaholic, but she also she has all these secrets that she doesn't tell anybody. She doesn't tell her best friend. She doesn't tell the husband she's falling in love with. She doesn't tell anybody. So she's supposed to be sort of both like archetypes of, and again, I know that's really reductive to reduce survivors to one or two categories, but that's my experience. Is I've been the rageaholic and I've met the stoic gal, and it's weight that neither should have to carry.
Yeah. No, that's really good that you put it into categories so that people can have something to kind of relate to be like, okay, maybe I'm over there,
Yeah.
I'm going to try not to get teary because both of those, like that convergence of those two things hit me kind of hard, Kara. My gosh.
You have a way with words and writing, Kara. And
I would say I'm sorry, but
no, don't.
No.
Every time a woman DMs me or says in her review that she cried, I'm like it feels so good. It's like, oh my God, my art made someone cry, which is terrible. It's awful.
No,
but
we need to cry.
Add one more because I cried reading your book too, especially at the end, Kara. I mean, wow. You came full circle with that story. I'm like, oh my goodness. Just to see where everyone ended up.
Yeah. The last chapter, I would say, like all my chapter titles are just one word, but if they weren't, the last chapter would have been titled Communities Over Churches.
Oh, wow.
That is what the characters are. They are problem solving. They're in a circle. They are supporting each other, lifting each other up without the sort of like threat/reward system of morality.
So you said this is kind of set in like a quasi-dark ages type of scenario, and you created an entire world that had all these new names. I mean, you even had some countries that were still developing and hadn't been named yet. Where did you get inspiration for that? Was there any particular culture that you base the story off of?
This is like an American like continent in the sense that, it's yet to be discovered. Or what, like nobody has come there necessarily, but like if you can think of the continent as like people have maybe existed for a couple thousand years. We've got, mining technology. We've got a couple other things that are keeping, we've got the wheel. We're not struggling, but also we're still learning so much. So that's why I put it in that Dark Ages setting. And essentially there's three defined countries. And then everything else is just sort of, it's tertiary. It doesn't need to be unpacked. And so Perpetain, where Edie is from, is like America in its worst theocratic, puritanical. It is a theocracy. If you can just think of like the most puritanical version of Christianity, women are inherently evil. And men that is their mission, is to rescue them through marriage and motherhood. And Edie fails at the motherhood thing. And as much as she loves her first husband, he is a product of that. And he is therefore an abuser. And so she runs away to this second place that is sort of allied with Perpetain, because the second place is this like beautiful, scientific, industrial city-state that is self-governed. It's like they're the only non-monarchy and they're the only democracy. And it's this city that's in the center of all of this mining land. So all of the sort of nobility comes from people that own mines and people that run these like universities in this city-state. And that place is called Eccleston. And it's still, because it's allied with Perpetain, it still has a little bit of that patriarchal, like women can't go to the universities, but Edie can get work because she can read and write as a scribe for one of the universities. And that's what she's doing when we meet her. Then off in the distance, almost the whole coastline is the country of Tintar, which Tintar is not, I do not believe in utopia. I really struggle when I read a fantasy and there is a utopian setting. There is no one right way to govern. And that's why like all governments fail in some way. Somebody fails. Like somebody is not done right by some contingency, some minority, whatever. And maybe at some point humanity will figure it out, but they certainly haven't in the world that I built. And it's also, I think utopia is super boring. Yeah. So Tintar is basically the town or the country that Edie is abducted to. It is essentially humanity, in the sense that if you take it is what the human, wild, unchecked spirit of just sort of like our pagan selves. And it's not good and it's not bad, but it doesn't have that patriarchal, sheen over it. The gods are not vindictive. There's 4 gods. There's 2 male and 2 female gods. So there isn't a patriarchal element. It's still early days in humanity. So yeah, women are a little bit second class in Tintar, but they can own property. They have a little bit more. They have the most freedom that you can probably have on this unexplored continent. And so those are the 3 things that the 3 sort of ideologies that I want. And it's basically like a spiritual progress journey physically for Edie too, because she starts out in this sort of like dark, hollow, why would you want to believe in this God that is so unkind and so punishing? And then she eschews religion altogether for 10 years as a runaway wife in Eccleston. And then she's taken to this super pagan land where she feels really emotional about this goddess and seen for the first time, and not seen under this punishing gaze, which is the religion of Perpetain, her home country, which is terrible. And we meet another character that's also from Perpetain and also suffered even more so than Edie.
You've mentioned the word pagan a couple of times, and I know Nancy and I have noted that when we were growing up in our particular cult, to say that something was pagan was how you totally said, this is the most evil thing you could possibly do. Here is what you should eschew, right? So, but it wasn't really explained, right? What that meant didn't necessarily make sense. It was just like, we were kind of meant to take it as something that isn't what we know religiously. So when
Right.
you say pagan and that this new land that she goes to is pagan in a way that sounds like it serves her well, what would you or how would you describe pagan in that context of her new home?
That That's a really great question because that term is used exactly the way you describe it by, like when the women are abducted, they are trying to, because nobody has gone to Tintar really. You don't go there. It's bordered by this really like thick, awful forest or mountains on one side, marshlands on the other. And so none of these women have been there. It's just not a country that you go to. And so they're trying to, and they know that these people are pagan. And most of the women that have been abducted are from this like science industry citadel. So to them, paganism and pagan worship is just sort of this like, wow, these people are very fanciful. But to Edie, even though she doesn't hold any judgment, that's what it is. It is this like other, mystical, like she doesn't understand that you can have, that there are faiths that are not punishing, that are just sort of like a celebration of natural like humanity. Like, and it's practical. Like I think a lot of people miss that about ancient beliefs and ideologies from, I guess, antiquity is a lot of like we kind of joke about it, and I guess maybe our minds go right back to like Greek mythology and stuff. But so many of these things have real world, like mainly agricultural ties to them.
Yeah.
It's the celebration of the earth or the celebration of, rain, snow. Like if you think about it, paganism in general, and I'm sure somebody may be listening and thinking like, wow, she's using that very umbrella terminology, but we'll just say it in an umbrella term. A lot of it is so innocent.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
it's so innocent. Like what is so awful about a fertility rite if everyone is consenting? And I don't have that in my book, but I mean, really? Yeah.
Totally.
So
Totally.
it's used in both. To answer your question, it is used in both as this like foreign, possibly evil thing, but also this like that's just what they believe, and it's like kind of normal and it's different. So
Interesting. You bring up a good point that, pagan, it seems like it does sort of pertain to things that are just very normal and very, I would say cyclical too, right? I know I looked into the holy day things that we were made to keep growing up, in our situation of high control. But when you go back and look at what those meant way back when to the people of the
Right.
Levant in, the Middle East, they were planting and harvest
Yes.
festivals.
Yeah.
I mean, if
Yeah.
we don't honor the systems that provide us our food, whether
Yeah.
that's, with dancing around a fire or just understanding that we need to keep the land nourished, that we're not stripping the land of its nutrients. I mean, that all to me can fall under that umbrella,
Mhm.
as you say, of how we connect to this planet that we live on and our sense of place, right? Because here
Yeah.
you're talking about Edie having lived in these different places that each kind of came with their own ideology, and she was able to have her own mind about that, it sounds like, and
Mhm.
understand what she didn't appreciate about each one, or
Right.
what she was able to reach into about herself that made her connect with her current situation. I think
Right.
that's really beautiful and really accurate to how that looks in a real lived experience of having moved through various types of churches or organizations that would like to get their fingers into our minds.
And I think the difference between, well, there's a lot of differences, but like the difference that I think we're circling right now is that in a lot of these like ancient religions, there's a lot of like gratitude towards the land, the sea, whatever is providing some sort of sustenance, protection. And you're not allowed to do that in high control religions. They're usually like the monotheism. It's the one, and it's usually the Judeo-Christian God, but it's like you can't have that gratitude or that like appreciation of whether it's spiritual or just practical. Mother Earth is the goddess that Edie ends up in the order of. Like you can't have that love, I guess, for like an idea that isn't God. you can't even say in like American evangelical Christianity, you can't even say, I'm smart or I'm strong, because God gave you your strength and your wisdom. I mean, that is how diminishing high control religion is you can't even like pay someone a compliment or pat yourself on the back without attributing it to God. And that's so reductive, and it really just doesn't let people be people. So the plot line is that Edie grows up in this theocratic, what have you. She marries this guy. She's the daughter of just like a clerical person in the clergy, and this nobleman takes notice of her, and she has this like whirlwind romance, but it's under the guise of this, and this is her backstory, because we meet her when she's 38. And so she marries this guy, and she's like, this is love, like this is everything. And of course, but it's under that umbrella of high control religion. And so when she can't give him an heir because he wants his father to hand off his estate to him and can't give him a son, she is punished by her church, because it is seen as, and anybody that grew up in American evangelical Christianity will know about how like you can be oppressed by a demon. Like as a kid, I was oppressed by a demon of rebellion. And so there's some spiritual blockage because women are inherently evil. And so without giving too much away, she leaves and she escapes. And she makes it to Eccleston, which is the city-state of science and industry. And for 10 years, because she can read and write, she has work as a scribe. She has these two best friends. She becomes a niece to one of their daughters. They're not typical women in the sense that they were able to find stability with like a wife and a husband. Like her friend that has the kid has like she's deserted. Her husband deserted her. And then her other friend, Misha, who was there for comic relief, but she ended up making me cry a couple times. Yeah, she's pretty funny. She's just like, I don't want to get married. She's like, I'll live with this guy forever, but I don't want to marry him. And then and Eccleston has all these trade agreements and all these things because they are sitting on all of these wonderful mines that provide like copper and iron and that kind of thing. So Tintar, this pagan land off in the distance, they have like a warlike culture in the sense that not necessarily that they're warmongers, but they're very like, you come at me, like I'll come at you. And so they're known for this sort of like having all these armies, having all this power militarily, like military power. And so Eccleston breaks their trade agreements with Tintar, and Tintar does what's called a restrained invasion. And that means any government or like monarchy building is going to be sacked, burned, raided, what have you. And if you're inside, we kill you. But if you're in your own private holding, we'll leave it alone. So Edie, it's the middle of the workday, and Edie thinks that she sees her ex-husband, her estranged husband, and it's been 10 years, and she's terrified. And so she runs into this little chapel, and the only existing religion in Eccleston is this like weird, dumb little thing where it's like, you know what, this is an employment office, but we're going to dress it up like a chapel so people don't feel bad coming and asking for work. But it's funded by the government. So she's like, I'll be safe in here. She kind of runs it, but she doesn't know it's an invasion. She sees her husband. She hides in the chapel. She's there for hours. What do I do? And then all these other women it's the middle of the workday. They can't make it home. They run into the chapel. They're stuck in there, and they're hearing the sounds of war outside. And they're like, what do? We just hunker down. This is a tax office. And they know that they're screwed. And so when these warriors come in, Edie, because she is a sharp cookie, she dresses them in the priest's robes, which is really just a guy who's like runs an employment office. And she sells to these warriors, the leader of which ends up being her husband. We're sacred priestesses. And Tintar, with all of its like belief and all of its like rich lore, they're like, well, we would never want anyone to kill our clerics. So, it makes them pause. And so she's like a vaudeville performer. She's like, I got this. And she's like, well, take us as captives. So they're taken to Tintar, and without giving too much away, Ulrich, which is our love interest, he is the leader of this small team of warriors that takes these priestesses, and I'm making quotation marks in the air, and his punishment for making the mistake of there are no priestesses in Eccleston, you're an idiot, is to fund the citizenship of all of these women and marry Edie and like support her as a husband. And so that was like my romantic device.
The book itself, I did very much think, oh, this is of the spiritual realm. And then also you have these beautiful relationships between the women, and your character development is incredible all throughout. And I think the relationship with Ulrich was, oh my God, I fell in love with him. He was so cute, but it was a nice bonus. I feel like it was just a really nice bonus in the book that you had, you know, a central love story as well, which is, I would describe a very, very slow burn that was well worth the wait. Like there was no, I mean, there was lust at one point, but she very much fell in love with her husband. It was very genuine. And I love the reality of your characters' lives. You see women that, you know, if they're traveling across the country as captives, of course they're going to need to use the bathroom. Of course they're going to get their periods. And then you touch on sexual assault a little bit. These things happen. You have your gay and lesbian relationships, which I absolutely loved that you included. It just felt so real, Kara. And I think there are going to be so many people that are going to relate to this story and feel like, oh, well, I'm 40 years old and I can read this story about these relationships and then the love interest. And yes, of course, we're still real people after 40. We're after 30. Yeah.
I have tended to get myself in a little bit of trouble online because here I'm running Apostate Sisters and claiming to be an atheist. But then I also say, well, I do a little bit of secular witchcraft as a personal development tool. And I think that, you know, there's a whole spectrum of people in the atheist community, and there are people, you know, may not see where I'm at as being fully atheist. But I come at it from, like you said, a very practical perspective, I would say. And I find it useful in this time of my life as a, you know, in my 40s, because I don't know if you've come across the idea of maiden mother crone, these phases of a woman's life. And it's really talked about quite a lot in like witchy communities, that kind of thing. But I found myself not fitting them. Right.
Yeah.
So like, obviously I'm past the maiden stage. I do have children, but they're 12 and 14 now. And so I'm still a mother, but it was like, I feel like that mother energy I understood when I had babies, toddlers, small children, and that energy isn't within me anymore. Like whatever that like deeply nurturing moment in my life is not in existence. And I certainly don't identify with crone energy yet. Thank you very much. And so I have felt like there's a missing piece, not only in that funny little way of looking at the phases of a woman's life, but just also like in American culture currently. You know, we have the things we're supposed to do as women, right? We're supposed to grow up and go to college and find a man and get married and have your career maybe and have babies and do all of that. But then there's not really this other place that a woman is like finds her place to be in our culture until you get to grandmother, right? As like an assigned role. And so it's almost like our culture would like to just ignore the women in their 40s and 50s type age. And yet I find this for myself personally, as I build my own self-confidence coming out of, you know, various religions and stuff, I find it to be a super creative, powerful time of my life, to the extent that I would love to propose we start talking about it not in terms of maiden mother crone, but in terms of something like maiden mother creatrix crone. That's the one I like.
Yeah, good word.
You know, I mean, because there is something powerful about this time when we have the experience that we do at our age, and we still have enough vigor, let's hope, to go out and do cool shit in the world. And so I see you know, you're not yet 40, but here you are absolutely embracing your creatrix energy in creating this book and this whole world where women are going to be able to see themselves. So it's
Mhm.
Yeah.
beautiful.
That's why I think a lot of women find comfort in, like, I'm a hedge witch, I'm a sea witch, I'm a, like, I'm a forest witch. There's not a lot of cubby holes where you can put your baggage in. You kind of come in and you're like, this is, and that is even addressed later on in the book when Edie talks about her infertility journey with Ulrich. And she says, that role was never one that I got to choose. It was just presented to me as like, you need to have a child. And we're getting away from that particular concept, I think, in we'll say like first world modernity and that kind of thing. But it's the energy is still there of like, this is what this looks like. And if you're not doing this, and I think people that are high control religion survivors, that is very triggering for them, whether it's societal or economical. Like, they've already had that experience with spirit, like in a spiritual way. And it's really, again, to go back to those two archetypes, like, that's why I think you have, like, for me, I'm a rageaholic, and like I had to learn how to not to do that, because I was going to push everybody away because you weren't going to tell me what to do. And sometimes it's just like, hey, that's not for me, and you don't have to set the world on fire. But you're right, like there's these spaces that aren't being talked about, but they exist. They especially exist in like communities of women.
To kind of add on to what you're saying, you're right. It's certainly not a role of mothering that every woman decides to take on, whether by her choice or not. Sometimes, yeah. And I find that role of the woman who doesn't have children to be so important in our culture, and yet it goes so unacknowledged, right?
Yeah.
Like, I have a best friend who along the way never did get married or have children, although she would have been a wonderful mother, I know. Um, but that was where she landed, and it just ended up not being for her. But she hasn't wallowed in that. She has instead come into this really beautiful role where she is an honorary auntie to so many kids, right? Like to my kids and several other of her friends. And it's a beautiful and necessary role, right? Like for our children to have another trusted woman, especially another trusted adult that they can relate to and connect with, and it not have to be their parent, I think is so important. And so I really feel like she's providing a service in a way. And so for her, I see that as the mother energy, although she is not a mother. And so I want to honor that in all women, whether they have had children or not.
There are women that don't, like myself, that don't have the ability to biologically procreate, and they decide not to have kids. Or there are women who, Nancy, you raised your hand, so I'm assuming you chose not to go down the motherhood path. Yes. Okay. So there's all these different like women that come to a child-free life in one way or another, and they still give birth in a certain way. And I actually come out and say that in, the final chapter, where I basically describe a community of people holding each other up, is that women, and it's Edie's best friend is the one that says it. And she says, and this woman has children, and she says, all women give birth. They just give birth in different ways. And some women, I'm going to try to quote myself, it's like someone give birth to beauty, to revolution, to sanctuary, to movements. One was a sanctuary, like what this woman that, without giving away too much, like this woman provided sanctuary for LGBT people that needed work, that needed it. And this other woman did this, and this other woman did this. And I purposely like included a trans woman in this story, because once you give that spirit, that womanhood spirit, if it is inside you, like you want to protect and create and commune. I think a lot of female written fantasy out there, which is, it's amazing, kind of does, they take the female main characters on a journey of strength, and quite often the strength is very masculine, and there's nothing wrong with that. We all loved Éowyn in Lord of the Rings. I Am No Man. We love to see it. But there's a special strength that is female. It is not warmongering. It is not aggressive. It is like, it's a mother bear. It's, you know, we're kind of laughing because we're having this like man bear conversation right now. And I kind of laugh because to me, bears have, it's like I obviously am on the right side of history. It's this one, like the bear. Okay. Like there's so many stories to back up the bear, but like to me, the bears are just this symbol of like maternal strength. Like a bear and her cubs, nothing is going to separate a bear and her cubs. And that to me is woman strength. Whether or not you give birth, whether or not you have kids, it's this sort of like wing thing. It's this extended wing. Come into my nest. Are you hungry? Are you hurt? And that's the kind of love that I receive from women in my life. And that is also not a love that works in high control religion. So that's why they don't want to uplift women, and they don't want us to talk to each other.
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting that you use the bear reference, Kara. There's some viral videos going around on social media where women were asked, would you rather be alone in the woods with a bear or with a man? And it was pretty heartbreaking, some of the responses that women gave.
Yeah.
And, you know, some of the men actually came out in support of it, saying, well, if you're triggered by this as men, maybe you should start listening to the women and what they have to say, because if you're feeling triggered, you're making it about yourself. And he just looked at all women. He's like, I hear your story. I'm sorry that this happened to you. And I like that in your book, you talk about the religious ideology as being the problem, and then people getting sucked into it. You didn't necessarily come out and say, oh, the men are the ones that are controlling and are monsters, because you did show that there are some incredible men out there who do support women and do care about their needs. And so I really appreciated those characters as well, to show that other side, like, oh, these wonderful, supportive men out there too.
Yeah. I think I'm a big fan of mirroring in writing. And I like to take like two things and sort of like a funhouse mirror them. And so I think the biggest mirror to me, aside from Edie's birth religion and chosen faith, are her husbands. She's two husbands in her life. And one is, they're both very devout men. Ulrich is very, very devout to Mother Earth. And her first husband, Thrush, is this, you know, patriarchal, like it's performative, but he's doing it. Like it's, you know, he's entrenched in it. Yeah. And they're two completely different experiences. She has a man who makes her first husband puts her in these smaller and smaller and more confined spaces and more pressure and more and more and more, until she runs away. And like in terms of space, all Ulrich does, because their marriage is arranged, because it is a punishment on him for bringing back the wrong captive, is space. He gives her all of this space, literal physical space. Like so she ends up working in the temple of Mother Earth in Tintar, and because she has a little bit of earth magic, and that is the order that he chose. He has no magic, but it is the order that he chose to practice. The gods work in tandem with each other. It's very simple. It's elemental. There's Mother Earth, Sister Sea, Father Fire, Brother Air, and they all have somewhat of a practical application. And if you don't have any magic, and only like half of Tintarians have magic, you get to choose kind of what you want to, like how you want to identify, how you want to worship. But the gods are not jealous of each other, and they work together. And Ulrich has chosen Mother Earth. And here's this woman that has a little bit of earth magic, and now he's stuck with her. And she says, you know, you in all this time, you've never come to the temple, and yet you claim devotion and all this stuff. And he's like, you didn't want this marriage. And I thought the least I could do is give you her, like give you your faith. He gives her all of this space because his faith is not about control. And her first husband, it is high control religion. It's all about control. And so I love playing with that mirror of like two devout husbands, two men of faith, that behave in completely different ways towards our female main character because of the actual fates.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the little nuggets you toss into the book too, Kara, about Edie is slowly coming to terms with her pain. She sees it come out in little ways, such as when she's brought to Tintar, we see that she can't be alone in a dark, secluded room. She needs windows. She needs to see the sunlight.
The way that you are redeemed in Rodwinism is if you are not, she cannot have a baby, or if you are a sassy woman, or if you are gay, anything.
Yeah.
You are in this coffin, and there's little holes in the coffin so that you can breathe, and you are in this coffin for days at a time on the altar of the church, and people are supposed to go up and pray over you. And of course, the words are never kind. And so that was like, and that's how I felt like growing up. Like I was exorcised as a kid for having a spirit of rebellion, I guess. And then you're talked about, like everybody in a church, they know, like everybody knows, everybody talks about it. And so that's what the experience that I wanted, that sort of fishbowl experience that you have as the designated sinner in a church community.
I related to that concept of boxing so much because as Patty and I are going through our podcast talking, we're realizing these little things of like, well, why do we do things a certain way? Like I can't to this day, like close my eyes, like put my head down and close my eyes in a room full of people. I can't do it because I'm just brought back to dark times. Maybe it was the long sermons, but everything about it I hated. And so Edie was really relatable when she mentioned that she needed to have windows, and her husband is asking, why do you need windows? Of course I have windows. And then it comes out. That's a trauma response.
We also get Quinn. So they're in this like magical forest, which is sacred to Tintar, and it is kind of like Mother Earth's like Mecca. So that's when, like, as she's being abducted, Edie is kind of like, what am I seeing? What am I feeling? Like, why do I identify with the earth so much? And it's just this like little grain of earth magic that she has. And Mother Earth is so like in love with Edie. Like we find out that like Mother Earth is just like, who is this fully formed human that I didn't know about before? Because I gave my God sort of like territorial power. Like they are really only powerful in Tintar. So we meet on the Neosa Road. They're bathing, and she meets this other woman, and her realize that they're both from Perpetuane. And Quinn is she's in her mid-40s. She has a partner that she introduces as her sister, but it is obviously her life partner. Like Edie puts it together and guesses like, oh, you're from Perpetuane. And Quinn is like, yes. And you realize that Quinn wasn't just boxed. Quinn went to jail for being gay. And later on, they're in Tintar, and Tintar has these like beautiful celebratory festivals for each god, and it's a high holiday, and it's joyful. Gay marriage is not legal anywhere in the continent, but it is decriminalized. It is legal in Tintar because they're still working themselves out. They're not a utopia, but they're when it comes to like sex and shame and that kind of thing, they're leagues ahead of everybody else. And so it's okay for same-sex couples to be together. It's not illegal. But Quinn is 44 and she's traumatized. And she says, it doesn't matter that I left Perpetuane 14 years ago. I still look over my shoulder for the sheriff. I still can't hold my wife's hand in public. And so Edie and Quinn have this conversation. I hate to say that Quinn is just there to show that somebody always has it worse than you. But Edie holds a lot of space for Quinn. And as a result, she gets this like amazing like best friend that's on the same level as these women that she bonded with initially in Eccleston. Quinn has been with River, her life partner, for probably over 10 years. And she can't hold her hand in public.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much joy and like natural human imperative that is just taken from you in high control religion. You can't believe in anything that's not God. Even if you walk away from God, God still exists. So all these other things can't exist because he still exists, even if you're not down with him, even if you don't want to go to church anymore, even if you're deconstructing. And it's just such a journey. Like deconstruction is such a journey. I think I thought that I had deconstructed, and I have, But I think that writing this made me realize that it is a lifelong journey.
Lifelong.
Correct.
Absolutely is. Yes. Some wounds never heal, but they do fade with time.
Yeah. She says to
Yeah.
Mother Earth, "You have healed wounds I did not know still bled."
The one female character that comes off as probably like the most catty and bitchy, I
Yeah.
guess you'd say, and jealous. Even she gets a spot in your book where it's like, okay, well, I guess I can kind of relate to her because
Yeah.
of what she went through. Actually seeing this woman and trying to relate to her.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Like,
Can
like
I
Mother Earth.
jump in on that for a second?
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
that is fucking revolutionary, Kara. Honestly, like, no, I'm so serious about that, right? Like, I think it is so easy for us to be like, oh, that person's evil, that person's bad. And it's even easier in books because it's an archetype, right? Like you're creating a character and they need to be all one thing. But I think it's absolutely revolutionary that you're dealing in characters that you don't want to see as so archetypical, that you want to bring out their humanity, because I think this is absolutely true. You know, we go through all of our churches of high control kind of stuff and the layers that are put on us because of that. And so it's very easy to direct our anger to the people who directly did those things to
Mhm.
us and
Yeah.
miss the fact that, like, well, hey, they've got a whole life that they went through that had events and experiences that set them up to
Right.
be the people that would then do that to you. And it was kind of experiences that maybe they didn't have control over too. Right? And so I think that us all developing our compassion even for our abusers, and don't take that too far, obviously, I'm not
Right.
excusing abuse in any way, but developing that compassion and seeing each other as fellow organic organisms on this rock flying through space, you know, can take us out of the things that would threaten to drag us down and help us see the bigger picture of who we are in context to these other people. And just and that compassion is where we can change the world.
Right.
So anyway, maybe I took that too esoteric, but thank you for developing a
No.
character that we can see how evil they are, and yet we
Yeah.
can develop some love for them.
Yeah. The one character that Nancy is referencing, I was really worried because I didn't want to introduce this sort of like typical sort of evil stepsister. The romance readers call it the other woman because, and it's such an old archetype, like nobody wants to do it anymore. But I needed something that would make Evie doubt, you know, whether or not Ulrich was committed to her, and or that he would ever like love her back as much as she. And so that character is there for kind of solely to like show Evie's ugliness, because Evie's pretty great, and I wanted to show that she can be like petty and nasty and just all these things, because that's totally normal. It's part of being a human. But Mother Earth said to her, have mercy. And it's true mercy. I think what you're talking about, Patty, is just true human compassion. There's this like stupid ideology around forgiveness with American evangelical Christianity, and I don't know. It's like so dumb.
I'm so pumped.
It's so stupid. It's true human compassion and true mercy are, this is my boundary. I understand why you did what you did. I've unpacked it, but this is my boundary. It doesn't necessarily mean that like you have to villainize this person. I mean, I can villainize a government. I can villainize a high control religion, but like the individual people. So I had this conversation with one of my beta readers. And again, I just am so amazed by these women who are, most of our strangers in real life to me. It's so weird. But we were talking about how, and she came from a high control religion situation. We were talking about how even though our parents, and this is not everybody's experience. If you're listening and you have decided to cut your parents out of your life for your mental health, I applaud you 100%. But this person and I were talking about how our parents are still in our lives. And there's been enough conversation and enough concessions made where at least a little bit of space for our pain has been held. And so as a result, we can have relationships with our parents. And we were saying, I forgive them, but I do not forgive the system and what that they were engaged in. But I don't forgive the deacons of my church. I don't forgive I was in the Assemblies of God. That was the denomination that we were mostly in. I don't forgive them. I don't. Like, you saw a scared, weird little kid who probably maybe needed medication. And you were like, yeah, she has a spirit of rebellion and we're going to exorcise her. And it's like, that's so, how, and I to circle back, Patty, I mean, obviously those men have had experiences that led them into that room. But again, I had experiences and I never perpetrated that pain on anybody else. I didn't take my religious upbringing and use it to gain power in. I tried to unpack it. I tried to be a good Christian. My sister and I were laughing that at some point, so many survivors of religious trauma do this circle back thing. At some point where they're I'm going to try to do it in a nice way. And she tried to do it and I tried to do it. And I did find an amazing, all outreach based church that literally did nothing but feed needy people. And they were pro-choice and pro-LGBT and they were great. And then I ended up moving from the city that they were in and they kind of helped me a little bit. I don't know, there's real forgiveness and then there's forced forgiveness. And the American evangelical Christian forgiveness is just so stupid. You know what it is? It's that dumb story about the Columbine girl that said, I believe in God. Remember that? That didn't happen. Do you guys know this?
Right. I heard that was totally debunked in the first week, but yet the story continues.
Totally debunked. And this poor woman, this poor girl died. And that's her legacy. It wasn't even true. But that's what we were sold is because it's the Father forgive them for they know not what they do. Right. And it's okay, but there's literally nails in your flesh. This is insane. It's just an insane level of forgiveness that the human brain cannot compute. And then you feel like an asshole. Sorry. When you don't
swear. It's fine. Swear.
Forgive.
Say whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah. Well, okay, so here's you're bringing up such a good point. I was just having this conversation with another friend about forgiveness and the idea that forgiveness has been twisted, right? So you talk about your parents, that is so sweet. And I love that they held space for you in that process and that worked out. I think that's wonderful. I think forgiveness, as you're saying, in an American evangelical context, way too often instead really means, all right, so you need to just say some words and then pretend like it never happened so that we can keep the peace because we don't actually want to address the harm that was caused to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the whole of what forgiveness kind of ended up meaning to me. And so, yeah, I have largely rejected the idea of forgiveness. I think at first it was, well, I can forgive, but I won't forget. Well, okay, I don't think that's good enough because forgiveness isn't something I'm willing to give for some of those things.
Right.
Because I'm not willing for it to be swept under the rug. I want to keep talking about how we got to that point and what was done because it's not like that's over for everyone.
Yeah, I'm allowed to set up my own boundaries. That does not make me a bad guy or a bad Christian. If you are a practicing Christian, it doesn't make you a bad Christian to set up a boundary. But the ingredients in that, we'll just say the American evangelical Christian, that AEC cake of forgiveness, the ingredients in it are you don't matter. That is the problem, is that when you start out with, you don't have any autonomy, you don't have any bodily control, you don't have XYZ, of course you have to forgive. You've had all of this other stuff taken away from you. Those are the ingredients in that cake. It's just, like I was saying earlier, I'm strong, I'm smart, I'm XYZ. So when you're saying negative things, in the not negative so much as true things like I'm not ready to forgive, or I'm not ready to ever let you back in my life. I forgive you, but like this is the door and please stay on the other side. That's automatically negated because you don't get to have an opinion. You don't get to be strong on your own. You don't get to be smart on your own. You don't get to do all of these things. And I think one of the other things that a lot of like high control survivors discover is in their deconstruction is they discover who they actually are outside of the groupthink, the mind control that is done to you in these churches, in these situations. And you realize like I do make the joke that like my default setting is rage, and then I am a rageaholic and I am really angry, but maybe my anger was just my child reaction to all this fuckery, like all this just like this is so stupid. Like I think a lot of kids have had the experience where they're just like, I know that this is wrong, but I don't know what's right. Like I know that I'm not happy. I know, but I don't have an example of what's right. We are told over and over that God loves us unconditionally. It is so conditional. It is so conditional. And it doesn't, I feel like there's that like effect, like Edie has this like affectionate relationship with Mother Earth. And I think one of the things that I like the most, and this is so silly and simple, but like one of the things I like the most about her relationship with Mother Earth is that Mother Earth likes her. She's like, you're like funny, you're smart, you know, and there's no relationship like that in church. It's very like God doesn't like you. God loves you unconditionally if you do XYZ. Like there's so little joy. And evangelical churches, they constantly talk about joy and all these like feeling oriented things. And then they'll turn around and say, they'll say, oh, you feel like I feel God in this house tonight, whatever. And then they'll turn around and they say, your feelings aren't real. If you feel a certain way, and if it's the wrong way, so there's just this like all this joy and all this like comfort that is completely removed from, like I said to my husband, who grew up super normal, like so normal it's weird. And I said, well, what is faith to you? And he's like, well, faith should be comfort, like it should provide comfort. And I'm like, bingo. But that is not what any of my experience was, or any of the experience of all these other people. There's no comfort.
Yeah.
There's no joy.
Yeah. Well, some people find comfort in delusion as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're deluding themselves. It's like people would say, "Oh, I'm so happy in my marriage," when really they're just trying to save face. I'm like, no, this is actually a terrible situation. But since we think it's God ordained marriage, I'm going to tell people I'm happy and blessed and all that. Just deluding themselves.
That's a good point. I mean, it leaves us somewhat unable to evaluate for ourselves if this is a healthy situation. Is this, actually beneficial, right? And it leaves us really unable to assess our risk levels when we're trying to do something, because we've had this like good and bad, black and white narrative taught to us through the church. And so we're trying to look at it through that lens, when really that's not going to help us navigate the world in any way. It sets us back from developing those skills.
Yeah.
Right. And we were taught to love this God who we were also supposed to fear. That is extremely dangerous. Supposed to fear the same person that we're supposed to love.
But I do get how it feels stable in a way, right? Because you've been told this is the answer. Like, here's what's going to happen after you live this life. And it's, I think there is some sort of like safety, stability that we appreciate from that when we're young. And so then when you grow up and realize, oh, that's not real. I think it can really be destabilizing, right? So, I mean, there's kind of layers here to the support that people need as they're exiting these churches of high control, right? Because it's like the rug just got pulled out from under them and they don't know what they're standing on anymore.
So I had this conversation with someone recently, and amongst all these other wonderful conversations. And she said, is this self-serving? I hated to like be the one to say this to her. I'm like, isn't that second guessing yourself? Isn't that exactly what they want? They want you to second guess yourself. I'm like, it's so deeply programmed that you're a couple years. I think she was several years behind her, which is in terms of deconstruction, really not that much. And she's still like at that stage. And honestly, so am I. Like when you're taught that you're inherently awful, and that, you know, even if you were given this amazing paradise like Eden, you're still gonna, you know, fuck it up because your man is awful. You just second guess everything, and all triumph, all joy, it's all under this God umbrella. And I just, it broke, like you were saying earlier, I think it was you, Patty, you were saying earlier, like, it's like sad that small pool of people that read my book were like, oh, I identify with this religious trauma. And it is rewarding in the sense that you get to have those intimate conversations with other people. But I mean, like, that is so sad that someone like intelligent and brilliant and affectionate and empathetic and has like all of these wonderful qualities to her outside of being a person going through deconstruction is second guessing herself.
Yes.
But that's their best, that's the biggest tool in their toolbox, in my personal opinion, is you are not enough. You are not the source of any wisdom. You are not the source of any strength. And so because you, like, the second you do something that is against that church, that arena, if you do something that they like, you know, you're doing great. But if you do something they don't like, they're like, well, man is fallible. Man is sin. Man is this. And it's just, it's the easiest. It's amazing if you think about it. It's like the best whiteout in the world.
Yeah.
They can just redact everything in the name of, well, man is fallible.
If they can convince you that you are less than, they have you. They have you in every way.
Yeah.
It's why the gender binary has to be maintained so strongly within churches. It's why evangelical churches focus on children between the ages of 4 and 14, because they know it's when they can take hold of those minds.
Yeah. And they get in there.
They sure do.
Something else that just occurred to me that I think that you guys would enjoy. I really loved your like bodily autonomy coverage. That was so good. Something else that I just thought of this when we were talking about just the sadness of all these other people having a similar experience, but it's affirming in the sense that they went through it and they're like, oh, you're not weird. You went through this. I barely touch on purity culture in my book. Barely. I grew up in purity culture. It was awful, you know, the chewed gum, the whatever, all the analogies.
Yeah.
I was such a little shit that I don't think it ever sunk in, because I have no heavy memory in me of like sexual shame.
Yeah. Same. Patty did though. Yeah.
Aw, you lucky ladies.
I mean, I'm sure it was harmful in other ways, but like the shame, I think my rage was just like this, like, no. But I barely touch on it in Priestess. Barely. I can't even remember how I touch on it, but I must, because the fact that multiple women have said, I grew up in purity culture, and that's what this reminds me of. That to me is crazy, because I don't talk about like, I mean, when I talk about like skin exposed, it's more in like Edie is like aware of that her skin is exposed around someone that she likes, but I don't address like head on purity culture. But it's so pervasive that even if you introduce a story about high control religion, all of these women, because I know that purity culture probably broke and hurt a lot of young men. I'm not saying that it didn't, but it really messed the girls up. It really messed us up.
And it's true. Purity culture, you really don't touch on it in your book, but yet I still feel like it's there. I loved the sexual freedom that all of your characters have. Like, it's true. Because, I mean, here, these women living on their own, and they just take lovers, you know. Of course, they're going to have a lover during this time that they
Yeah.
enjoy, not necessarily someone that they need to marry, just someone
Right.
that they can be sexually free with. And I
Yeah.
loved that. Yeah, it's weird. I couldn't even give you one example that I thought was purity culture in your book, and yet I do feel like it's there somewhere. It's saturated in the story.
Well,
Amazing.
it might be the female friendships. Maybe it's that other side of like when you take out purity culture, when you take out when like women get to have like honest conversations that women have about sex are not necessarily, first of all, they should be humorous and they should be fun, and sex is a joyful thing.
Yeah.
But on the other side of that too is like it's information. Like that guy, don't go around that guy. You know, that's part of the telephone too. So I think maybe when you maybe that's what people are seeing is that the lack of purity culture creates a system of information as well as like a circle of like pleasure and happiness and joy. And the women tease each other about sex, and it's normal.
Yeah.
And like one of them is a little bit more naturally ladylike, and
Yep.
but it's not a shameful lady. Like Helena is not like ashamed. She's very reserved, and she doesn't.
She's a classy woman.
She's a classy lady, and
Yeah.
but her reservation is not pushed on to other women.
Yeah.
Like that. There's like that is her reservation, and she doesn't push that on other women. And I think like I guess maybe that's just kind of what female circles look like when you have that purity culture element removed. So maybe that's what people are seeing. But I was just amazed. I was like, wow, I don't even address this at all.
Yeah. But then Helena does come out at her wild side. And I loved seeing that. She's like, okay, maybe I'm not as reserved as I thought I was. So maybe that was a little bit purity culture there, that Helena was reserved in that manner, but then she realized, oh, maybe I'm kind of a wild freak, and I'm enjoying this, exploring my sexuality in public spaces.
Well, she just needed the right partner. Like her first husband was like a turd. So
yeah.
Well, I am so excited about your book, Kara. I want your book to do so well out in the world. So I think everyone should check out Kara's website, find her book. Can you let everyone know where they can do those things?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'll just reiterate that I'm super DIY. So because it's a labor of love, I've done my best by it, but I pour all of my artistic like my energy, that's sort of the business of art energy into my art, because I see myself as an artist first. So I don't have a website for the book. It's just my Instagram. Kara Needs to Read. It's Kara with a K. And the book is available on Kindle right now, on Kindle Unlimited, but you can buy the ebook for $4.99. And the paperback comes out for $19.99 on the 18th of June. It's going to be really fun. It is a beautiful book. My friend Mark did an amazing job. I think the spine is like the prettiest.
Oh, Patty, you're going to love the book so much. I actually read it twice, Kara, because I loved it that much.
Oh my God. That is so nice of you.
So thank you everyone so much for joining us. And don't forget to reach out and find Kara Reynolds. Join us next time on Apostate Sisters. Yay! Can we all do it?
There goes.
Is it going to do it? Oh, Kara, does yours work for that?
Oh, like and subscribe. There it goes.
That's really funny.
Well, you know, or you do the thumbs up and it gives you a little. There it goes. Yep, thumbs up.
Oh, that's
well, I don't know why yours isn't doing it.
I think sexual tension is so much more interesting than actual
sex. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And it takes more talent to do. So good job, you.
The King of Qatar is also basically like Kanye West off of his meds. This happens every time I'm having fun in a conversation. I need my bed. Like I need my bed.
He's so cute.
So he's so cute.
I was so in love with him. Oh my God, that had me in tears. The end, I was like, oh my God.
Like everybody's like, you know what, bitch? I didn't cry until the epilogue. That really, I'm like, that'll get you. If this and this and this doesn't get you, that belong's gonna get you. But in the moment, he's pissed because he's like, wait a minute.
Yep.
Now I'm like super attracted to you. Now I respect you. Fuck you. Like, get the hell out of my head. She's like, who the fuck is this guy?
When his sexuality like is realized and it comes out and like, where was this guy? Oh, he must have been an absolute hell.
Yeah, he is. I torture him desperately. Like, I'm just the worst. You guys have got to get off this call. I will be here for hours. My husband will be like,
I just
"What's
want you
for
to keep
dinner?" I'm like,
going, Kara, because I am loving the backstory behind this. I'm just like, after I read your story, I emailed you immediately because I was just like, oh my God, I want to be a part of this world. So as a writer, I knew you would get it. I'm like, I got to let her know how much I loved it and what I loved about it. I'm like, yes, a writer
you.
who's to hear that.
He gushed all at me too about it. So
Yeah, I was like, Patty, read it. It's all good.
it was
This
so
was
great getting to
amazing.
talk to
I'm
you.
so excited.
Thank you, Kara. I was so excited to talk to you. And yes.
There's something that Christianity does to women, and it is
Yeah.
really a specific type of fucked up.
We have a lot of, I mean, we do have more women coming up now, but it's definitely a majority of our viewers are men. So I find that very
Patty is
interesting.
so hot.
Stop.
You focus on this forbidden fruit, of course it's going to get plucked. I will make the most lovable character in this book that has like the sexiest lines, the swooniest courtship, a bald man.
Yes.
Watch it. Your email made me cry. So thank you.
Oh, your
email
book made me
was
cry.
So great.
You guys are even now.
Wait, one more thing. Just kidding. Just kidding. All right.